Hey, it's Matthew from Dark Ascent, and today I'm going to uncover the moment Sherpas turned on one influencer during an Everest summit push. Driven by ego and control over his own narrative, he began ignoring safety protocols and dismissing the people responsible for his survival at altitude. What unfolded above 24,000 feet and the breakdown that followed inside that team still weighs on me. It was May 3rd, 2017, during the pre-monsoon Everest season, after the icefall doctors had completed the Khumbu icefall route with conditions typical of early season operations on the mountain. Everest Base Camp at 17,600 feet held about 360 climbers across 28 expeditions, alongside a tightly connected Sherpa community of just over 200 people linked by regional ties and repeated seasonal work on the mountain. Minjeo Blaustein had arrived at base camp that morning after the standard 8-day trek from Lukla, the small airstrip town at 9,383 feet that served as the entry point for most Everest expeditions. He was 31 years old, originally from Austin, Texas, and had built a modest online following over several years through travel and outdoor content. His content consistently framed each expedition as a largely solo effort, emphasizing personal endurance over support systems. Earlier guided trips, including a summit of Aconcagua in 2016 and a trek to Everest Base Camp in 2015, were presented as self-driven achievements, with logistical support and local assistance largely omitted from the narrative. From what I've seen in similar cases, this kind of framing usually hides way more than people realize. A guided summit of Aconcagua in January 2016 had been described publicly as a solo ascent. A guided base camp trek in 2015 had been monetized as a 4-part series in which the porters carrying his equipment appeared only briefly and without names. The brand had grown because the story it told was compelling, and because the audience consuming it had no mechanisms for verifying what had actually happened on those mountains. Everest was the culmination of that narrative. Minjeo had contracted through Himalayan Crest Expeditions, a Kathmandu-based guiding company, for a full-service permit package at approximately $85,000. The fee covered permits, Sherpa support, oxygen supplies, and logistics from base camp to the summit and back. 2 sponsorship deals, offered by a technical apparel brand and an outdoor equipment manufacturer, offset much of the cost, with a combined value of approximately $290,000, contingent on verified summit footage delivered by June 15, 2017. Minjeo had taken a $60,000 personal advance against that payout before the expedition began, making a failed summit financially consequential beyond the loss of the attempt itself. When I first came across this, I had to pause because of the financial pressure here. His assigned Sherpa staff numbered 14, 1 head Sirdar, 5 high-altitude climbing Sherpas, and 8 load carriers. The head Sirdar was Lakpa Norbu Sherpa, 46 years old, from Tema village in the Khumbu Valley. He had 22 years of Everest guiding experience and 9 verified summits. He was known for maintaining detailed field notes, documenting equipment, loads, and client conduct, a practice he began on the first day of the trek from Lukla. 2 of the 8 load carriers were in their first season above Camp 2, reflecting a cost reduction decision by Himalayan Crest Expeditions to meet the expedition budget. Base pay for the Sherpa team was approximately $2,600 per climber for the season, below the rates offered by several neighboring expedition operators on the same route. The puja ceremony took place that afternoon. The puja is a traditional Sherpa blessing ritual conducted by a lama before any climb, considered spiritually essential by the Sherpa community, not as custom or performance, but as a genuine act of prayer for the living and the dead. Every Sherpa team on the mountain observed it with reverence. The ceremony involved the construction of a stone altar, the burning of juniper, the offering of food and drink, and prayers that acknowledged the mountain as a sacred presence, requiring respect before entry. It was not a brief formality. It was the moment at which the season formally began, and the weight it carried for the Sherpa community was not separable from the losses that had accumulated on Everest across generations. I think this is the part a lot of viewers underestimate, but you can feel how serious this moment actually is. Minjeo filmed the ceremony from multiple angles. He repositioned his camera twice, mid-ritual, to capture better light, and at one point stepped briefly in front of the Lama to adjust his frame. That evening, he edited the footage into a 90-second clip with an upbeat royalty-free music track and captioned it as a cool local ritual the guides do before heading up. The post circulated widely within the first day. Within 24 hours, the post had been seen by Sherpa community members in Namche Bazaar and Kathmandu through family contacts. Screenshots circulated through WhatsApp groups used by Sherpa guides across multiple base camp expeditions. The caption, specifically the phrase, "cool local ritual the guides do," was the detail that stood out most. The puja was not a performance for clients. It was a prayer for protection, an acknowledgement of the risks of the mountain. Lakpa Norbu saw the post that evening, along with guides from several other expedition teams. His field notebook entries from that day only recorded the post, the caption, and the time he viewed it. I had to sit with this for a second while reading the notes. This isn't background detail, it's something people there treat as deeply personal and serious. The first acclimatization rotation began on May 5th. The team moved from base camp through the Khumbu Icefall, a constantly shifting maze of ice blocks, seracs, and crevasses that had to be crossed multiple times during each expedition, and that represented the most statistically dangerous section of the South Col route, and up through the western CWM to Camp 2 at 21,300 feet, before descending back to base camp for recovery. The rotation was standard procedure, designed to stimulate the physiological adaptations that allowed the body to function at extreme altitude. It was not optional, and it was not comfortable. The icefall required crossing aluminum ladders lashed horizontally over crevasses that dropped hundreds of feet into blue darkness, moving quickly through sections where seracs the size of apartment buildings could shift without warning, and managing the psychological weight of a place where most Sherpa deaths on Everest had occurred. I keep thinking about how standard procedure sounds calm on paper, but nothing about this is calm in practice. During the rotation, Minjeo asked 2 high-altitude climbing Sherpas to carry his camera hard case in addition to their standard loads. The combined carry weight for each reached 61 pounds. Lakpa Norbu logged the discrepancy and sent a written load amendment request to the Himalayan Crest Coordinator in Kathmandu. No action was taken. Minjeo filmed a segment at 21,000 feet, describing the physical demands of altitude in first-person terms. 3 Sherpas were visible in the frame. None were named. Comments from Nepali accounts flagged the omission. Minjeo did not respond. The rest period at base camp ran from May 10th through May 12th. On May 10th, Minjeo filmed a sponsored gear review, crediting both brand partners by name. The video description listed him as the sole expedition member. Himalayan Crest Expeditions was not mentioned. The Sherpa team was not mentioned. On May 11th, Lakpa Norbu requested a formal meeting with Minjeo and the Himalayan Crest Coordinator. The meeting lasted under 10 minutes. Minjeo acknowledged the load concern and stated that his camera equipment was non-negotiable. The pay discrepancy was not addressed. Lakpa Norbu's notebook entry from that day records the meeting time, the duration, and the outcome. It does not record anything else. The second acclimatization rotation began on May 13th. During the ascent through the western CWM, Minjeo stopped the team 4 times for filming setups, asking Sherpas to walk specific lines for camera composition, hold reflector panels, and reposition mid-ascent on a glacier where stopping unnecessarily extended exposure time in a section known for afternoon serac activity. This is the part where I just pause because every extra stop up there isn't neutral. It compounds risk for everyone involved. The total added time across the 4 stops was approximately 2 hours. 2 load carriers who had planned to descend from Camp 2 before dark were forced to overnight, consuming oxygen that had been allocated for the Camp 3 carry. At Camp 3, reached at 24,500 feet on the Lhotse face, Minjeo filmed a sunset sequence and recorded a voiceover describing the loneliness of being the only person up here who chose to be. 13 Sherpas were within 80 feet of him at the time of recording. May 16th was a rest day at base camp. Minjeo was filming a segment about preparation and self-reliance. He called over Mingma Dorje, the youngest load carrier on the team, 24 years old, in his first season above Camp 2, and asked him to hold a reflector panel while Minjeo recorded a monologue. Midway through the take, Minjeo stopped, looked directly at Mingma Dorje, and waved him out of frame with a dismissive hand gesture. The gesture was brief and casual, the kind used to move an object out of the way, not a person. One of the high-altitude Sherpas, who was recording behind-the-scenes footage that Minjeo used for supplementary content, captured the moment on camera. The clip circulated at base camp within hours. By evening, it had been seen by Sherpa staff across at least 11 other expedition teams. It was not the first offense. It was the one that made the first offenses unforgivable. The puja caption had been disrespectful. The low demands had been exploitative. The erasure from the videos had been consistent and deliberate. Based on my research into similar expedition conflicts, it's rarely one moment that breaks trust. It's the accumulation that finally tips it over. But the gesture toward Mingma Dorje, a 24-year-old in his first high-altitude season, waved away like an inconvenience in front of a camera, was something the community understood without needing to discuss. Lakpa Norbu called a full team meeting that night. It lasted 2 hours and 20 minutes. The decision reached was not to walk off the mountain. Walking off would have ended the season for 14 men and their families. It would have cost them the income the season represented. It would have been visible, documentable, and subject to the kind of scrutiny that could follow them into future contracts. The decision was to continue, and to ensure that when Minjeo needed the mountain to be survivable, it would not be. From what I've seen in expedition reports, this kind of decision logic is less about emotion in the moment and more about consequence management under extreme constraints. Minjeo posted his departure video on May 17th. It described the summit push as the culmination of everything he had worked for. The Sherpa team was visible in the background, fully loaded, moving towards the icefall. The caption read, "This is it. Just me now." By this point, repeated concerns had already been recorded in Sherpa field notes and passed through informal channels within base camp communication networks, and what began as isolated observations had consolidated into an established pattern of unresolved tension within the expedition structure. Movement through Camp 1 and Camp 2 on May 17th and 18th was normal in appearance. At Camp 2 on the night of May 18th, Dawa Sherpa, assigned as Minjeo's primary high-altitude climbing partner above Camp 4, made a deliberate adjustment to Minjeo's primary oxygen regulator. He partially loosened the inlet valve connector, introducing a slow leak that would reduce effective oxygen delivery by approximately 35 to 40% under sustained flow. Reading this part straight, I just feel uneasy, because oxygen up there isn't a margin for error, it's the margin for survival. The adjustment took under 90 seconds and left no visible external mark. The pressure gauge read correctly because the leak was positioned downstream of the gauge. Flow rate test, a simple check performed by timing the pressure drop against a known standard, would have detected it. Minjeo did not perform one. Separately, Tenzin Furba applied slight lateral pressure to the front bail wire on Minjeo's right crampon, introducing 4 millimeters of deformation. At base camp temperature, the crampon is attached to the boot normally. At minus 25 degrees Fahrenheit on a 48-degree slope under sustained load, the cold contraction of the metal would cause the bail to lose its seating against the boot welt. The team reached Camp 4 at the South Col, 26,300 feet. The South Col is a broad, wind-scoured saddle between Everest and Lhotse, one of the most inhospitable places on the route, exposed to wind from multiple directions and offering no natural shelter beyond the tents anchored to the ice with deadman anchors and ice screws. Minjeo connected his oxygen regulator, checked the gauge, which read correctly, and confirmed his system was functional without performing a flow rate test. Lakpa Norbu observed this without comment, and what really stuck with me here is that he just let it be. No correction, no reminder, nothing. Just acceptance in a place where every small check actually matters. Lakpa Norbu conducted the final team briefing before the summit departure, the 55-foot rope gap at approximately 28,200 feet. A section of the southeast ridge, where fixed rope had been damaged by crampon traffic and not yet replaced, was known to all Sherpa teams operating on the route. Repairing it before their client passed through was the responsibility of the lead sirdar on each team. Lakpa Norbu stated plainly that the gap would not be repaired. No one in the room objected. The briefing ended. Summit departure was set for later that night. Minjeo departed Camp 4 with Dawa Sherpa positioned behind him and 2 high-altitude Sherpas moving ahead. The oxygen leak was already active. Against a set flow rate of 3 liters per minute, Minjeo was receiving approximately 1.8 to 2.0 liters per minute, a deficit he could not perceive directly, but that manifested as a pace roughly 25% slower than his Camp 3 to Camp 4 ascent. He attributed the sluggishness to altitude. The night was clear, with stars visible above the ridgeline and the beam of his headlamp cutting a narrow path across the snow. Wind was 38 miles per hour, within operational range but at the upper threshold for a climber without technical high-altitude experience. The temperature was minus 27 degrees Fahrenheit, with a wind chill equivalent to approximately minus 58 degrees Fahrenheit. The balcony, a small snow platform at 27,600 feet that serves as the first significant rest point above Camp 4, was reached during the ascent. Minjeo rested for 17 minutes. He briefly removed his oxygen mask to check his face for frostbite and noticed reduced mask pressure, which he attributed to the altitude and did not investigate further. Dawa was present throughout and said nothing. The two Sherpas ahead had already moved on. The GPS unit Minjeo carried, a device his management team had insisted on for real-time tracking during the summit push, recorded his position, elevation, and movement at regular intervals. That data would later be recovered via satellite sync. That silence between everyone there feels heavier the more I think about it, like nobody is stepping in anymore, just watching things unfold. Minjeo's right crampon front bail released its seating. The bail had contracted in the minus 25-degree temperature and was no longer flush against the boot welt. Minjeo stopped, retightened the strap system, the secondary retention mechanism, not the bail itself, and continued. The crampon appeared stable. This is one of those small equipment issues that doesn't feel urgent in the moment, but I know how unforgiving that becomes at that altitude. The GPS data shows 2 instances of path deviation from the fixed rope line by 10 to 14 feet before self-correction. A pattern consistent with hypoxic disorientation produced by the oxygen deficit. Minjeo was clipped to the fixed rope throughout, but his decision-making was measurably degraded. The mountain at that elevation, in those conditions, required a level of cognitive function that his oxygen supply was no longer supporting. The team reached the rope gap at 28,200 feet. The two Sherpas ahead had stopped at the terminus of the fixed line and were waiting. The gap was 55 feet of unroped 48-degree snow and ice in complete darkness. Wind was 41 miles per hour. The temperature had not changed. The fixed rope ended cleanly at a picket anchor, and beyond it, the slope continued upward without any line attached. Minjeo stood at the rope terminus for several minutes before beginning to move across the unroped section independently. Dawa did not move forward. The two Sherpas ahead did not move to bridge the gap or communicate the severity of what lay ahead. At a point later, estimated at 28,190 feet, the right crampon front bail released completely. The front points lost contact with the ice surface on a 48-degree slope in complete darkness, with cognitive function degraded by sustained oxygen deprivation. The loss of front point purchase on the right foot produced an immediate and unrecoverable weight transfer. There was no controlled response. The slope took him. Minjeo fell diagonally across the northeast face, accelerating over approximately 220 feet of open terrain. His ice axe, Sakari, carried but not deployed in a self-arrest position, consistent with his non-technical mountaineering background, made contact with the slope twice without catching. He impacted a rock feature at approximately 27,970 feet. He came to rest against a snow bench on the lee side of the rock feature. His personal locator, beacon activated on impact, triggered automatically by the device's impact sensor. And once the fall starts at that angle, it's not really something the human body can meaningfully interrupt anymore. At Camp 4, the beacon signal was received by the Himalayan Crest Expedition's monitoring system. Lakpa Norbu was awake. He reviewed the GPS coordinates. He noted the elevation, 27,970 feet. He noted the wind speed, 41 miles per hour, gusting to 56. He noted the temperature. He noted the remaining time before daylight. He did not assemble a rescue team. Shortly afterward, the Himalayan Crest Base Camp coordinator, monitoring the same signal, contacted Lakpa Norbu by radio and asked for a status update on rescue mobilization. Lakpa Norbu reported that conditions at Camp 4 made immediate departure unsafe. Wind speed, darkness, and the unroped gap at 28,200 feet. The assessment reflected real conditions, though it did not result in action. A rescue team from a neighboring expedition was later contacted by the base camp coordinator. Their sirdar declined, citing the same conditions and the fact that their own clients were preparing for a summit attempt. At first light, Lakpa Norbu departed Camp 4 with 3 Sherpas. They reached Minjeo's position later that morning. Minjeo had been exposed at 27,970 feet, without functional oxygen in minus 27-degree temperatures and sustained wind above 40 miles per hour for several hours since the beacon activated. He was deceased. Core temperature was not measurable in the field. Lakpa Norbu documented the time of discovery in his field notebook. The body could not be recovered from that elevation. It remains on the mountain. The incident was reported to national mountaineering authorities by the expedition company shortly after the event. A formal investigation was opened in the following days. Investigators reviewed Lakpa Norbu's field notebook, the beacon activation timestamp, the radio log between Lakpa Norbu and the base camp coordinator, and the GPS data recovered from Minjeo's device via satellite sync prior to the fall. The official cause of death was recorded as fatal trauma, consistent with an uncontrolled fall on high-angle terrain, compounded by hypoxic impairment and subsequent fatal exposure. The oxygen regulator was not recovered. The crampon was not recovered. The investigation noted the delay between beacon activation and rescue mobilization and classified it as a delayed response within the documented range of high-altitude operational constraints. No criminal referral was made. The finding was closed as an accident. A detailed written account was later published, drawing on expedition records, field notes, and interviews with Sherpa staff who spoke on condition of anonymity. The report was subsequently referenced by several outdoor and travel-focused publications. Minjeo's management company issued a statement describing his death as a tragic accident and announcing a memorial fund. Both sponsorship brands issued brief condolence statements and did not renew any associated contracts. Minjeo's content was quietly removed from his channel by his estate within a short period. The channel was never updated again. When I step back from all of this, it isn't one moment that stands out, but a chain of small failures across equipment checks, communication, supervision, and decision-making that were never corrected in time. Prevention here comes down to earlier enforcement of basic safety steps like oxygen flow testing, clearer accountability for equipment handling, and ensuring guide concerns are acted on rather than recorded and set aside. Responsibility is layered. Individual actions played a role, but so did a system that allowed repeated risk signals to go unaddressed until they became irreversible.